let's start rolling right now. So, what is the American dream, right? What's that look like? What is the American dream to you? If you were only looking at homeownership through a mortgage rate, a spreadsheet, or some national headline, you are missing the entire point. That's how I started this, and I wanted to say that again. You have to understand that there is far more to this than just that. So, after they're done talking about the interest rate, then they start talking about, the inventory. And it's high in some places, it's low in some places. Obviously, I work in Denver, Northern Colorado. If you're starting to look for homes or thinking about that journey or thinking about selling, please call me, text me. The number's on the screen. And the truth is, inventory is different everywhere, right? And it can be as hyper local to your neighborhood, to the next neighborhood, to the type of home you have, to all of the things. So we need to, obviously have that as a metric in our journey, but it's not the whole story, right? Everyone is talking about whether housing is a good investment. Well, historically, it's a pretty solid investment, to be completely honest with you. And that's a point I definitely want to bring home is, the investment piece of it is so overblown, right? Maybe it's me, maybe it's a lot of us. The investment part is smart. It's a huge way to build wealth. The house hacking, how I have 6 doors that cash flow, a decent amount of money every month. Yes, the investment is part of it, but it's not the whole thing. And we need to make smart decisions with our money, but we can't be ultra focused on that and completely blow it. Almost no one is talking about the life side, right? The life side of the decision. A home is where you build a life, raise a family, create routine, plant roots, host holidays, and have something that is actually yours. That doesn't mean ignore the math. That's definitely not what this is about. But as my good friend Jimmy Everett said a couple weeks ago on his stories on Instagram, he's a lender, there's so much more to owning a home. And that really got me thinking about okay, yes, we got to know the data. We got to dial in all of the things. But what we actually have to focus on is what the home means to the person that's buying it. If buying a home was only about beating the S&P 500, Thanksgiving would be held inside a brokerage account. Sounds miserable. Also, no one wants gravy near their retirement portfolio. That's true. Okay? So that's really where I wanted to take this live and talk to you guys about what actually is going on, and understand that the data is important, but the data should not drive your decisions. Your life, your personal situation, whether you're selling or buying, should be a major point of this. Okay? The market is not one thing. The national housing story, not crash or boom, it is a market adjusting to higher rates, affordability pressure, more selective buyers, and sellers who are having to come back to reality. Trust me, I loved going on listing appointments when I could just drop a number that would knock people's socks off in a good way, versus going into a listing appointment where it's well, we actually are going to break even, or we're going to lose some money, or, that kind of stuff. Depending on when you bought, every seller's in a different point. The market changed in every neighborhood a little bit differently coming off of the COVID boom. Existing home sales in May, obviously we're just into July, so we don't have June numbers yet. We're up 3.2 month over month, 3.2 year over year nationally, and the median existing home price was $429,300. We talked all about this, right? Inventory nationally reached 1.55 million. Homes equal to a 4.5 month supply, right? So that's where we're getting closer to that balanced number that people say 6 month supply of inventory is a balanced market. We don't even have to go in there because, first of all, I don't think it's true anymore. And second of all, it's a really hard metric. Essentially, months of inventory means that if no houses went back on the market, it would take us 4.5 months, based on that number to run out of inventory. Pending home sales rose 3.8% month over month and 4.8% year over year, right? Buyers did not disappear. They got picky. Sellers did not lose all the leverage. They lost all the ability to price their favorite memory from 2021. And that's exactly what we talked about last week. So we don't need to go in depth in that, but we do need to bring it back. So I want to be clear. Rates matter a lot. I don't want this to feel like it's, disingenuous, or I'm not caring and I'm blowing it off, because the rates are important. It is the basis of the 30-year fixed mortgage, that dictates how much we're paying each month towards principal and interest. We won't talk about taxes and insurance. We talked about that a couple weeks ago as well. Okay. So the average mortgage rate, was somewhere in the middle sixes on June 25th. Rates were closer to 6 in early March. So affordability got a little better, then it tightened again, right? More than half of the current market mortgage borrowers are still below 4%. The ones that have a loan are still below 4%. So the rate lock effect is real. Less people are selling their home because they feel like they can't move. And there's no part of the American dream that you should feel a prisoner in your own home just because of the interest rate that you do have. Buyers are also beginning to accept above 6% mortgages, as we move forward. That might be the new norm, right? I'm not a mortgage professional. Call Jimmy. He's the one, right? This is why people feel stuck. Sellers are stuck to old rates. Buyers are stuck with new payments. And somewhere in the middle is a real family trying to figure out where they're supposed to live and plant their roots. And that's the important piece. I want you to understand the investment piece is a bonus for, what we're talking about here. The rest of it is your life, right? Having a place to raise your kids, having a place to, call your own, being able to do whatever you want in your home, right? We still love, as renters, moving into our first home that we own and being able to paint the walls any color or hang the pictures up with any sort of hardware. But holding on to a 3% mortgage rate is like holding on to your high school jersey. I respect the nostalgia, but at some point we have to ask whether it still fits your life. So this is the emotional centerpiece, right? This is what it is. We got too investment focused. We knew about the rates. Information started traveling, right? That happened for understandable reasons because it was a positive thing. As we bought a home and our, home appreciated at, Lamborghini level speeds, that was cool, right? But at the end of the day, our bank accounts didn't grow, right? It's just your equity in your home. I mean, maybe they grew, but your equity in your home is technically not your money. It's not liquid. You still have to put the house in the market and see what the market dictates, right? People built serious equity. Investors got loud. They were excited. They made good moves. They bought when the market was, less crazy, and they made a lot of money. So social media turned every house into a wealth hack, but homeownership was never supposed to be only about ROI. It's about stability, ownership, having a place to call your own, building a life around a foundation, creating memories, putting down roots, having control over your space, giving your family consistency. The research supports this angle. The market is not only investors chasing arbitrage. It is still households making life decisions in a higher cost environment. The American dream is not dead. It just requires more clarity, more planning, and less fantasy math. So let's talk about the math, because the math test is very important, especially when applied to the life test. So this should become a very important framework as we're working. And I talk about this a ton when I'm talking to my clients. Where are you going? What's this look like? Why are we doing this? Because that's absolutely important. Every real estate decision has to pass two tests. The math test, can you afford the payment? Do you have enough reserves? What happens if taxes and insurance rise? Is the rate manageable? Are you buying with enough time horizon? Are you protecting your future options? The life test, does this home fit the next 3 to 7 years? Does the location support your daily life? Is the commute realistic? Does the space work? Does the neighborhood fit your lifestyle? Are you buying piece or just buying square footage? Right? All of these things come into play. And then the truth is, for sellers, are you staying in a home that no longer fits just because the rate is low? If it passes the math test but fails the life test, you may end up house rich and miserable. If it passes the life test but fails the math test, you may end up stressed every month. We need both. We need a balance here. So let's dive into Denver a little bit more. Denver does not support a lazy one-line narrative. DMAR showed closed sales down 6.97% year over year in May. Attached sales were down 17.84%. So condos and townhomes, this is something that is a reality. Active inventory rose 6.24% to 12,259 units, But that is because homes are taking longer to sell, not because supply is just flooding into the market. Payment on today's median 615 home is about $3,498 per month based on, the interest rate I said earlier. Roughly 87% higher than 6 years ago. That's insane. Denver city prices were still up 2.5% year over year, with a median days on market at 18. But the trick of that is the average days on market was 37. So that is not a frozen market. That is a disciplined market. Good homes are still moving. Overpriced homes are sitting. They're collecting dust like an elliptical in the basement. So let's dive in a little bit more hyperlocal. Cherry Creek, roughly $1.65 million median sales price, down 0.93% year over year, about 23 days on market. South Denver, $882,000, up 2.3%, about 14 days on market. Aurora, roughly $462,000, down 2.3%, around 30 days in the market. And Parker, $659,000, down 3.4%, but still selling in around 16 days. So same metro, different math, different buyer pool, and different strategies. So this is why national headlines do not answer your real question. They can describe the weather. They cannot tell you whether your house, your equity, your payment, your neighborhood, your commute, and your next chapter makes sense. So let's go up north. Go Rams, right? We'll head up north. Northern Colorado is fragmented too. Fort Collins is not Greeley. Larimer County is not Boulder County, and Boulder County is not Boulder City. Price tiers matter. Property condition matters. Lifestyle matters. And this is huge, right? When we're putting homes on the market, no matter where you're at, we have to understand that property condition matters because that average mortgage price is so high, right? They have to understand that these people moving into these homes are not just going to sit out and, come in and be like, yep, I'll take that 30-year-old furnace and I'll take that, roof that, maybe doesn't have hail damage, but it's old and needs replaced. Because all of that stuff comes into play. Going back to the insurance conversation, as deductibles rise, as all of this stuff rises, it costs more. So we have to understand that on the front end, the mortgage payment, the monthly payment is a very important piece to how buyers are approaching inspections and all of the things. Fort Collins had 1,647 active listings in May. Median listing price was around $590. The median days on market was 44. Larimer County was closer to balance with a 100% sale to list ratio, which that doesn't even matter, right? Let's talk about 100% sale to list ratio. That means that the price that you list the home for sells. That doesn't incorporate the 50% of listings that have price reductions, or 45 depending on your market. 38 median days on market. Loveland prices were up 3% year over year to roughly $499,701, with homes taking about 49 days. Greeley were down 1.9% year over year to about $424,746 in roughly 58 days. Boulder City was much choppier, down 14.5% year over year with 50 days on market. Northern Colorado is not one market. It is a bunch of markets wearing the same hoodie. And sorry that I incorporated Boulder into Northern Colorado. It just was a good microcosm to put those together. Stop waiting for a fantasy market, please. Waiting for 3% interest rates to come back may not be a strategy. Waiting for a crash may not be a strategy. Waiting because the payment does not work absolutely is the strategy, and that's where we need to focus. That's where the math problem and the life problem come together in synergy so that we can bring this American dream to you if that's something that you desire. Having a place of your own, having consistency in a monthly payment based on your mortgage, all of those things. Waiting because the payment does not work, please note that down. The difference matters. Some buyers should wait, some buyers should buy, some buyers should change price points. Some buyers should consider new construction incentives because that's a way to get in and maybe manage some of that mortgage payment. Some buyers should look at a different neighborhood. Some buyers should buy less house and more peace. The goal is not to buy the biggest house the lender says you can afford. It never has been. The goal is to buy the home that supports your life without making you hate the first of the month when that mortgage bill comes. If you're trying to figure out whether buying now actually makes sense, call or text me 303-543-1453. We will look at the math and the market and the life side of the decision. Let's go to the seller side. Sellers cannot price like buyers have unlimited urgency. Listing price is a starting point, not a shelf tag. The national data shows more pricing realism, not broad distress. Underpriced and turnkey homes are moving really quickly, right? Underpricing a home 5 to 10% is definitely a strategy that some people are using. And then you see, oh, we sold this in one day with multiple offers. Well, you underpriced the home and maybe left some money on the table. Or maybe it was a good strategy and it worked. Homes that are overpriced, dated, and poorly presented are sitting. Presentation and pricing are now doing the heavy lifting. The market does not care what your neighbor got in 2021. Your neighbor barely knows what happened in 2021. If you're thinking about selling, do not start with Zillow vibes and your emotional attachment to the backsplash. Start with the real competition, your likely buyer, your condition, and your next move. Because ultimately, your next move, as I always say, if you're buying in the same market, you're going to get a deal on the home if you're giving a deal on the home you're selling. So let's talk here. The American dream. Back to homeowners. A lot of people are trapped by a low rate, but the current home may no longer fit. As families grow, families change, people move in, people move out, all of the things, kids move out, they grow up, and then they come back, maybe, or maybe they don't. Parents age, job change, maintenance becomes too much, commutes change, life changes faster than your mortgage statement. And that's something that we need to really focus on. We are still living this life. We still have this one life. And so we have to understand that the home, if that's something that's important to you, let's figure out how to make it happen wisely with the math test, and more importantly, that fits your needs. Are you staying because the home still works, or are you staying because the rate is too good to leave? For move-up buyers, right? Does the extra space solve a real problem? Can you keep the current home as a rental? This is key, right? This is where the investment conversation comes into play. This is where the math really tells the tale. People talk all the time about investors, right? Investors are pretty easy clients for real estate agents to have because it's all based on math. There is no emotion. On the residential side, it's a much more tactical approach in figuring out exactly what it means. So maybe you are crossing over from a primary residence to a rental. Great idea. I've done that 6 times. It turned out pretty well for me. Do you need to sell first? Would a temporary higher payment be worth the lifestyle improvement? And that's a question that I can't answer, but I can certainly tee up for you and your significant others or anybody that's moving in. For downsizers, are you buying freedom? Can you reduce maintenance? Can you unlock equity? Can you get closer to the people and places that matter? Right? That's why we're doing this. If that makes sense, we absolutely have that solution. So let's bring it down. There is a value in knowing your neighbors. There's a value in your kids knowing the park down the street and being able to go outside and play with the neighborhood kids. There's also a value in having a garage, a backyard, a kitchen table, a basement, a front porch, or whatever home means to you or your family. There's a value in painting the room, planting the garden, hosting that birthday party, and building the traditions. Not every value shows up in an appraisal. Some of the best returns on home ownership never show up on a spreadsheet. They show up in birthday pictures, Christmas mornings, backyard games, and the feeling that you finally have a place that is yours. So, how do we get practical, right? Let's talk. Before you buy, sell, or stay put, answer these questions. And we can have this conversation. Please reach out, scan that QR code, book a call with me. Let's have that conversation. Does the monthly payment actually work for you? Like really? Or is it like, I really want to be at $2,500, but they said there's no way, so I can be at $3,500. And yeah, we can make that work. We can pull some money from savings. We can do this. Does the payment actually work? Does the home fit the next 3 to 7 years? Because we want to have that gap. Because if you call me in a year or two, my projection is that the market's going to be fairly similar, and you're not even going to be able to afford real estate fees or, anything. You're going to have a little bit of principal, reduction, and maybe that covers with a little bit of appreciation, the cost to sell your home. Is the neighborhood aligned with your daily life? Are you buying because you're ready, because you're panicking? Are you staying because it works or because you feel trapped? What happens if rates do not drop soon? What do? What happens if prices do not crash? What does the decision do for your family, lifestyle, and long-term stability? Let's answer those questions. The right move isn't universal, it's ultra personal. And that's where I think sometimes we focus so much on the numbers and the metrics and everything. And sometimes as real estate professionals, we don't slow down and make sure that we're understanding the exact personal situation that's going on. Do you still believe in homeownership as part of the American dream? Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about what matters right now. What is that number to you? If the rates dropped, which I would highly suggest not focusing on, if the rates dropped under 6 or 5 or 4, which I don't think will happen in a long time, under 4 at least, would you move? Are you holding on to a low rate even though the home no longer fits you? So let me know. Let me know what cities you're in. Let's have a conversation. Comment on here. Send me a DM. Tell me what city. Tell me what you want to talk about, and we can definitely dive in. The American dream is more than a mortgage rate. It is more than an investment. It is more than timing the market perfectly. It is about building a life on a foundation that makes sense financially, emotionally, and practically. And if you want to dial that in and really focus, if you have questions about Denver, the suburbs, Northern Colorado, or you're exploring, possibilities to move, let's reach out. Before you move in, out, or around the Denver metro or Northern Colorado area, call me, text me, book a call. Let's talk about your hyper-personal situation to make sure that we can bring the market stats to you in a way that makes sense to you and helps you achieve your goals. See you next time on Why Invest Wednesday. It was a good one. The American dream is still alive, and it's not all about the interest rate. See you next time.